On today's Faith versus Culture, we're talking about trauma, grief, and the gift of laughter in difficult times. That's coming up.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, welcome to Faith versus Culture. I'm Goins-Phillips here with Billy Hallowell. Billy, how are you today?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be here.
It's good to be here, and it's good to have our guest with us today, author and comedian Chonda Pierce. Shonda, how are you? I know you're on a bus, so.
I'm on a bus, so there's might be a little roar back there, but yeah, that's my life.
You're touring around America.
Yes, my roaring life. Yes, I'm in the middle of tour, and it's going great, and I'm so blessed that people still come and see me. I don't know why. I'm trying to retire. Stop buying tickets. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. My mortgage says, please stop. Please buy tickets.
You're in the middle of a tour, and you've got a new book, a memoir coming out called Life is Funny Until It's Not.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about why you wanted to write this memoir now, because there's a lot of vulnerable stories in there about your life.
There really, really is. And isn't that life? You know, one day it's hilariously fun and going great, and then boom, something happens and it's not so funny. And I have done this for 32 years. I've made a living telling the good and the bad and the ugly of myself. Every night, every video, everything I've ever done always has a meaning to the madness, you know, by the end of the night. And so I just decided all in one setting, get all my words said and no, not hold back, you know, and my life has not been easy. And yet my mother taught me, you know, so well that to make make lemonade out of lemons also, and to know that you're not alone and there's other people. Look, you can turn on the television and see someone's life harder than yours. But I just wanted to see the pathway from trauma to trauma. There's a lot of time in between, and there's a lot of things you can learn, good and bad, in between all the ups and downs of your life.
Yeah, you know, people know you, they know you for the comedy, right? And you have had these big, tough moments like every human being does. And then you're tasked with sort of putting this into a book.
Yes.
Was that a challenge to decide, okay, I want to share this, I don't want to share that, even getting into the details of what you were going to share?
You know, to be honest, I'm terrified. I'm terrified as it hits the stands and as people start reading it. I used to joke going, well, when you read this, you'll never come see me again, you know, because it's that real and raw. I look back at it now going, oh, maybe I shouldn't have told that, but yet I stand by everything. I've learned hard lessons, and I've learned them the hard way. And I pray that I was able to show, not just tell, but to show good things to do in the bad days and things to not do in the bad days, and in the vulnerable days. Pain and grief, widowhood to abuse, all of those things will leave you vulnerable and a cracked door for Satan to either teach you, you know, to either learn the lesson wrong, or Jesus is there to help you learn the lesson well. And I've done both those things.
Yeah, I think people who are looking in might look and say, you've been through so much trauma, you've dealt with a lot of loss and grief. There have been a lot of opportunities, to your point about Satan can sneak in. There have been so many points for you to walk away from the Lord, and people would maybe understand why you chose to walk away from faith. Talk a little bit about how you've chosen to, even if it is difficult and you do have questions for the Lord, you've chosen to cling to him rather than run away from him.
And that's just got to be a God thing. I mean, you know, sometimes you just can't, you throw up your hands, you can't explain anything. Carrie Williams, who travels with, we were just talking about that this morning. There are things that it's not coincidence. It's not, oh, well, that was lucky. You just throw up your hands and go, that had to have been God. And that's how I feel, Trey, that it just had to have been God to keep wooing me to himself. And he will not let you go. My thing is always, it'd be really good for you to cooperate with what God is doing rather than fight against it or want to do it your own way, because he will in the end be God. He will win, And so that, and also I have a tremendous love and respect for the Word of God. And sometimes it's not because it's just so historical or you learn so much, and that I'm not trying to be overly spiritual, but what I need in my life is foundation. I need things that do not waver. And when they say God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, that's powerful to me, because with such inconsistency in my past and in my childhood, I needed a foundation that doesn't waver. And God does not waver. And the Word of God does not change. And I needed that. I don't like seeing in culture right now that they are, redacting, or they are rewriting or watering down certain things in the Word to make people feel comfortable. I don't need that in my life. I got to have something that's going to stay the same, even when it's hard. Even when it's hard to love your neighbor and to like Billy Hallowell. That's hard.
It's so true though, right? Like being refined by the truth. And even when it hurts, not believing a lie or being bought into a lie or telling somebody else a lie to make them feel better, really embracing the truth. If you could go back, and maybe this is a tough question. I don't know what I would say if somebody asked me, but if you could go back based on what you were saying, follow God, he's going to win in the end. If you could change one thing that you've done in your personal life or your career based on knowing that you should have just followed God and you didn't, what would that thing be?
Wow. Which sin do you want me to talk about, Billy? Let's dissect my sinful past. You want the honest thing that's a real honest? Drinking too much. I grew up with no alcohol in your life whatsoever. And then a pastor gave me a bottle of wine for a gift one time. That I was 40 years old. That was a wrong introduction for addictive type of personalities. And so as my brother says, there is no good thing that comes from alcohol. There is no good thing that comes from drugs or anything else that's going to be mind-altering or emotion-altering, because that's dangerous. And I look back at the times I got myself most in trouble in college, were the times I was that I was out there with the crowd, and I hate it. I'm ashamed of it. Those are the parts I hope my kids skip over, those pages, But it's true. And if I could say, and that's why I fuss at my son all the time. If I could just say one thing to a young person, don't do anything that alters your brain chemistry. Nothing. Don't do anything. Rely on the Lord for that, for not just the high, but rely on the Lord to get you through that moment in an honest way, and let your body speak volumes. When you are inebriated, or when you are smoke a pot. I never smoked pot. I promise I didn't inhale. And, all those things, but anything that comes along that's altering who you really are. And that's identifying as something else. Anything that you are trying to change who God created, it's going to lead to disaster. It really is. And in my life, those are the times I got tripped up the most, when I was looking for relief in all the wrong places.
You're talking about some difficult things here, but we're also kind of laughing through it too. And it just reminds me of how much laughter can be good medicine, as Proverbs says. And laughter is such a good tool to communicate really difficult truths sometimes. But like, you've seen over the course of your career how comedy has been received in culture. And I think we're in a time right now when comedy is sort of under attack. Like, it's not okay to laugh at things, and we kind of villainize the comedians who make light of really tough things. And in our culture, talk about that, about how comedy is so necessary in a culture, whether you're Christian or not, to really talk about the difficult things of life.
One, you're right. Comedy is a great relief in the release. I'm not the first one that thought of that. That's in the Bible that says laughter doeth good indeed like a medicine. And it's so true. We need all of our emotions. We were created with all of them. And so using them all at a proper time and at a proper place, it can be great medicine. It can be great relief. It's okay to be angry, but sin not, so it's those emotions that we use. I will say, Trey, when they start coming at comedy in this cancel culture, we're all in trouble. Believe me, I don't like filthy comedy. I wish people would not take that precious jewel of an art and run it through the mill of nasty words and nasty, subject matter. But I applaud everyone's right to speak. If you would go back and follow some of your great comedians of the past and watch their old stuff, you would have a blueprint of what was going on culturally in the country. And so it's a great historical reference, you know what I mean, up to following comics. Now, I do hate it when it gets filthy. But at the same time, when you start trying to cancel people who are taking bits and pieces of culture and making light of them or talking about them or their right and their free speech for them to decide what they want to talk about, that's a problem. It's like rewriting a history book when you start changing up what comedians, want to talk about or are talking about. You can't regulate and legislate the heart. That has to come with a spiritual change and a spiritual awakening in each individual out there. I wish we could write a law that says we never use ugly words anymore. My mother would have loved that, or we never talk about this broken person here or that over there. You can't regulate some of that. That has to come within your heart. And I look and think that's kind of what cancel culture is trying to do, is make us all the same person. And we'll never be the same person. That's what gives us the flavor of individuality. It's what makes the world go around. And so, yeah, I applaud every comic that's out there, but this canceling thing's got to go away. Look, believe me, and I'm surprised I haven't been canceled. I've been trying to get canceled. Please, just get.
Well, there's
I need to stay. Oh, yeah.
There's so much more to discuss, and maybe in the second segment we can work to get you canceled if we want. But we will have a lot more coming in the second segment of the show, so stick with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Faith versus Culture. I'm Trey Goins-Phillips here with Billy Hallowell and comedian and author Chonda Pierce. One of the things I want to ask you about, Shonda, is how did you get into comedy? Where does that fit in with your relationship with the Lord? Was this something that you knew, like as a kid, I really want to just make people laugh?
No, I used to just try to make my mother laugh to avoid getting a whooping. You know what I mean? If I could make her laugh, she would forget why she's coming at me with a hairbrush. I fell in love. I was a theater arts major in college. My mother was really good about noticing our things we liked and then helping us pursue that. She would drag me to auditions when I was a little kid, for theater things and the local, theater groups. But it wasn't until college I met one of my teachers. Happened to write the shows for Opryland USA, which was a theme park in Nashville. And as a college kid, I went there and auditioned, and it was my first job as a married woman, singing and moving slightly to the music because I wasn't allowed to dance back then. But I was in one of the shows out there, and in order to get a paycheck, I was terrible at dancing because my church believed it would send you to hell. And so they gave me the part of Minnie Pearl, and I impersonated Minnie Pearl for 5 times a day, 6 days a week. And the providence of God, it was interesting because I look back, it was at a time when nothing in my life was particularly funny. I was coming out of a divorced home after my father had been a pastor most of my life. My sisters had recently passed. I had married my high school sweetheart, but the new months of marriage, and is difficult and strange when you grew up like me. And suddenly I get a job making people laugh. And that is really when the laughter was great medicine for my own life. It was years later, I got saved again. I got saved 340 times growing up, because that's just my theology was a revolving door experience with Jesus. And so the last time, I think it really stuck. And I didn't think I was allowed to do comedy in church. And I met a man named Mark Lowry, who invited me on tour. And I opened for him for like 70 cities. And as they say, the rest is history. I just fell in love with making the church laugh. And I've had opportunity and invite to step outside of my demographic often. And I've done USO tours, and I've done a few comedy clubs here and there. But as for me and my house, for some reason, and I've argued with the Lord about it, but for some reason, I feel like my calling was to just hold a mirror up in front of the church world and say, one, we need to laugh about this, or here's a truth that you can feed, and it's easier to be fed in this funny story than it is just come right out and saying it. So that's been my MO, and I love it. And I love my demographic. I'm 32 years. I've made a good living where I am, and I'm happy. Yeah.
Yeah, and you are, you're highly accomplished. You're the best-selling female comedian in history, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the RIAA, the people that give gold records or platinum records, I think I've had the most platinum and most gold records of anybody, because I'm certainly not the highest paid. And even at the ceremony when they were giving me the big gold records or platinum records, and I said, but this is so hard to believe, because there's Chelsea Handler and Whoopi Goldberg and, Ellen DeGeneres, Joan Rivers. And the man said, I know, we did the math twice because we'd never heard of you.
Well, it's one thing I have to say about you that's really interesting too, is that you're not afraid to say what you think, right? In comedy and outside of comedy, you'll weigh in on things that are happening, a little bit of politics. And, a lot of people are too afraid to do that because of the cancellation, but now knowing you want to be canceled, maybe that's why. But why are you so open, about what you believe and think?
Well, who was it? There was a great comic. Well, one of my favorite sayings, Lucille Ball said, "I'm not funny. What I am is brave." And I love that quote. Who was it that Mark Twain said, I'll always speak the truth so you don't have to backtrack to see what it was, but you'll remember what you said before. And that's a lot of it. I just have to just be honest. I do have a filter. I just don't use it enough. And that was something that was wrong with me since the day I was born. That's my mother.
I want to ask you too, as we're kind of rounding out the conversation, tell us a little bit about, and this is kind of a big question. So, but you've been doing this for 32 years as a comedian. Looking back, what do you want people to see as your legacy when they think of Chonda Pierce? What do you hope people see? Because you've been so vulnerable, so honest, and you've made so many people laugh, but you've also pointed them to Christ at the end of the day.
My number one thing, Trey, and even in reading this book and every tour, I pray they don't really remember my name, because one, they can't ever pronounce it. So might as well not remember it. I pray that they go, there was this funny girl, but man, did she believe in God? Did she love God? And that paid off. You know what I mean? That, wow, there must be a God because she made it. And surviving is one thing, but thriving is another. And I've done both. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Shonda, for taking some time to talk with us today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Trey. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
All right, stick with us. We'll be right back for another segment of Faith versus Culture here on the CBN News Channel. Welcome back to Faith versus Culture. I'm here with Billy Hallowell, and I'm Trey Goins-Phillips. Billy, what did you think of that conversation with Shonda? She's always a joy to have on because she'll make you laugh, if nothing else, but also communicates just a lot of truth about the gospel.
Yeah, no, she's always so fascinating because even before you go on air with her, she makes you laugh. I mean, she's just a very funny person. And I think, we talked about this in the interview, but she's gone through a lot, right? With her husband's death and just other issues. And I know the book explores a lot of that. So just getting a chance to see somebody who can laugh through it and be grateful despite all of that is incredibly powerful and also just fun. She's just a fun person.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder, conversations like these, that it is important to laugh. There's nothing wrong with laughing. I think as Christians, sometimes we can be a little bit too serious when it comes to spiritual things. Obviously, we need to take the Word of God seriously, take our spiritual relationship with Him seriously. But God is the inventor of all of these things. If there are people like Shonda who are so funny, just imagine how much funnier the Lord is, because that's where we get all of comedy, is from the Lord. And I appreciate what she said too about how we take good things and we kind of pervert them. So there's a lot of comedy that isn't honoring the Lord, but there are opportunities like she's done for the last 30 plus years where you can honor the Lord in humor and you can honor God with laughter, because it is a good medicine for us. It's kind of a balm to the soul, I think, when we're going through really tough times. I know my family, we've been through some tough seasons, and when you can laugh, it's like, man, that just kind of lets some of the steam out. So it's good to have those conversations, and great to know that God is with us in the good stuff and in the bad stuff, and will carry us through. So such an important conversation. I'm glad we could have her on, but stick with us. We'll be right back to wrap up this episode of Faith versus Culture. That is all the time we have for this episode of Faith versus Culture here on the CBN News channel. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't already, head over to cbnnews.com. You can subscribe to our Quick Start newsletter so you never miss any of the news of the day, and our daily Quick Start podcast that's out every weekday morning. But again, that's all we have time for here on this episode here on the CBN News channel. God bless you.